Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. My name is David G, and I'm an account executive with Playing P. And today, I'm very fortunate to have a couple guests with me. I have AJ Alvarez, who is the director of Latam marketing at Symphonic Distributions, and I have Calma Carmona, all the way from Puerto Rico with us today, and AJ from Florida. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today.
Thanks. You.
Happy to be here.
Yes, very.
So you ladies are all on the East Coast or Eastern Coast. So tell me, how's your day going thus far?
The hurricane missed us, so I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. We still have a little rain and a few thunderstorms, but it's all good. I still have light, so
still have power and shelter.
I still have power, so it's a good day. Yeah.
There you go. Good, good. I'm so thankful that you both are okay, and you're in your homes, and your friends and family are all okay as well.
Yes. Thanks.
Perfect. Good. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Okay, so today, we are here to talk about the Latin market. And AJ, you've been certainly entrenched in that market for some time. Previously, over at VP Music Group, prior to coming over to Symphonic, and Calma, being an artist within that market yourself. And I'd love to just start by telling our viewers who are watching right now what brought you into the music industry, and what sort of things do you strive for being involved in the community? So maybe we start with AJ.
So I was working in the nonprofit world, so I was doing a lot of festival bookings and different kinds of fundraiser events, and in the midst of that, we were working with tons of artists, international, mostly. It was an international organization. So I worked very much in the world market and working with acts from all over the world. And I really just wanted to be in the music industry at the time. So I was trying to just pick up everything that I could at the time and, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And I worked pretty closely with those artists, and I was able to parlay that into more freelance style work later on. But all the while, I knew I wanted to be in the industry. I just never really knew what I wanted to do. This became a really natural fit, marketing and things like that. And I kind of fell into it. I think that's the best way to say it. You find
meant to be.
Yeah, you just, you want to do something, you're just not exactly sure what, and that's how I found it.
Amazing. Sometimes things just align in that sense, right? When you think about it that much.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. How about yourself, Calma?
Well, as a little girl, I kind of always had a vision of myself singing on stage, so I kind of always knew what I wanted. Didn't know how to attack that, really. It was a little bit unconventional in my family. I come from a military family, so it wasn't like it was a normal thing to tell your parents that you want to do, no. So eventually I just started studying music and getting myself out there, and I got a few big breaks, and that's when reality hit. And I wasn't a kid, I wasn't 18 when I first started or put myself out there as Calma Carmona. I was 23, and I had a job, so I kind of knew about contracts. So when I got offered these big deals, I was just like, whoa, this is not fair. So
terrible, throw it away.
It was sort of like a reality check. And, I'm an artist, so I can create and kind of be free and do what I want. And I just decided to go my own way until I gained a little bit more leverage and could find something more just. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's very important, especially as an independent artist. The landscape of the music industry can be difficult to navigate. So finding people who are there to help support you and believe in your craft are absolutely vital and important. And, knowing people like AJ doesn't hurt as well.
Absolutely.
But that's fantastic. So it seems like both of you from the early get-go already knew that you wanted to be involved in the music industry for yourself, Calma, on stage, performing in front of an audience, and yourself, AJ, just being involved in some aspect or another. And that was very similar to myself as well. So very happy that we've all come to this point in our careers where we can talk about that and discuss that in virtual person. So thanks again for joining me today, ladies. So I guess this question is a little bit more geared towards Calma. In a consistently shifting landscape, how do artists find a sustainable way of living, being part of the music industry? And I guess for yourself, how have you been able to shift that into a career for yourself?
Well, I see this whole era of change sort of as an adventure. No, there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of things changing, and we are creative. So just really getting creative in how to look for loopholes and alternatives to make revenue or to put out there your product is to me it's like an adventure. No, I say for people who do have a line of some sort of income, to not get rid of it. If you have I mean, you have to live.
Great advice.
You have to, don't get rid of that line of income. It's more, how do you invest whatever you're making into your brand, your company, your music, however you want to call it, and how to be more strategic and specific on how, or, what you spend on that. I feel now with all the changes, getting a record deal is not the most idyllic situation. It could be, if you get a really good deal, go ahead, that's awesome too. But I feel now we're moving in towards partnerships, partnerships with brands that are alike with what you represent, or production companies, or even digital distribution companies that are looking into investing and partnering with artists. So there's a lot of ways to grow your business, I believe.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, partnerships are vital. When you have someone that can represent you for who you are as an artist, and your focus can stay on the creative side itself, it allows you to grow in a shorter period of time. So that's super vital. So that's great. I mean,
I forgot one
key one.
Yeah, one key one is, if you're starting to look for like a collective of creatives that are also trying to look to expand their catalog or expand their work resume. And sometimes, you have this photographer that's really talented, but they haven't had the opportunity to to have a lot of work done, or a filmmaker or a producer, and kind of like network and find those people that you guys love each other's work and can all grow together. So that's a really big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like having your network and your circle of creatives just support one another and help each other grow and sustain each other.
Absolutely, because making a song it's expensive,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't typically come cheap. Typically.
No.
And I guess, AJ, for some of the artists that you've worked with, what were some of the difficulties that they've run into, that they've had to shift their mentality to have a sustainable living within the community or within the music industry?
I think the biggest change for any artist is like the most obvious one, and not being able to tour at the moment. I mean, that is really where so many artists find their bread and butter essentially at this moment. I think changing the focus to monetization and finding your publishing and trying to figure out where all of that is actually coming in It's been a positive, but it's also been the biggest challenge because there are a lot of artists who really don't know all of the avenues that they could be making money that wasn't touring in the beginning. So I think that that shift has been very uncomfortable for artists who are maybe a little less comfortable talking about the actual business side of, you know, the industry. And I know that that has presented a particular challenge that, you know, before was not a consideration, you know. I think the other thing that Calma kind of touched on was this sense of creativity. And, you know, artists have been more creative in this space with their art. I think that the other challenge or the other balance of that challenge is being more creative with your marketing and being more creative with what you're doing to try to get to your audience at a time where the market is so saturated with actual content that isn't necessarily part of the music industry. You're up against that same content, whatever Netflix is putting out, whatever, you know, is coming up on Vice, you know, like all of these other avenues for content. You're just as in the mix essentially, and the market is really saturated. So pushing artists to be creative on that level, on that side of the business, is another challenge, to be completely honest, because it's not something that they have been focused on previously necessarily. Some cases that is, you know, that's not true for everyone, of course. But I do think that has been the two challenges and the two sides of this coin that have been particularly difficult to stomach during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you are so used to touring and being in front of your audience as well, to have to stay at home, maybe try and have a live show off of your phone and do your best to remain connected. I think that's a huge difficulty for us all, but absolutely for those artists who look to have that source of revenue through touring. With that completely gone for the next foreseeable future, aside from some of these new drive-in shows that have been coming up, which I think are amazing. Calma, I would come and see you at a drive-in show. Hands down, I'll drive wherever I need to go. Just let me know. I would be there, absolutely. But being creative in new ways, you know, alternative ways that maybe weren't done previously are absolutely how artists are going to thrive in this current landscape as it is for the foreseeable future, until we do get to some sort of new normal as it will be moving forward. So that's great advice. In regards to the Latin market itself, are there any opportunities that have arisen for Latin artists in particular that stand out from potentially like a mainstream sort of avenue, as opposed, like, I guess, being more international? Does that provide more opportunities for Latin artists? That's a weird question. Actually.
I don't know who wants to take it
first. When you talk about digital marketing, it's a lot cheaper. And not only is it a lot cheaper, but it's more population. So the results could be a lot greater. So just targeting really the niche of what your music, where it's resonating, and targeting specific countries, and especially in the Latin market, which is huge, is a very good idea. So I think that's, if you're a Latin artist, that's definitely an advantage.
I think we're still in a time where the Latin market is being understood by the wider mainstream market, if you will, especially US and the Western European markets. And so with that understanding of the market, the opportunities have presented themselves to present Latin as a subject matter for education for other groups who are listening to other music, because truthfully, Latin is not a genre. It's a way to bucket everything that is Spanish speaking in the world and put all of these subgenres into like one group. All of these things they fit into their own genres. If you look at Latin hip hop, which covers trap and reggaeton and all of those, they actually fit into the hip hop market. They're just in Spanish. So I think that the new opportunities have all been presented as, this is an opportunity for you to educate, the rest of the markets on, what is your sound, where does it come from, and where does it actually fit? And I think that opportunity lies in trying to get that content side by side with other content in other languages.
And also, I don't think that the artist necessarily has to be Latin to promote themselves in Latin countries. I mean, you see Rihanna, you know, doing Rock the Rio and, you know, in Brazil, and she doesn't speak Portuguese. You know, you see Beyonce in Colombia, or other artists that are smaller artists, but you don't have to speak Spanish for people to appreciate your music in the Latin market. So you don't necessarily have to be Latin to promote yourself in these countries. So.
And that's great advice for any sort of artist who's already promoting themselves, but maybe they've had some traction in a Latin market at this point, but haven't known whether or not to approach it, and vice versa. I think it's like AJ mentioned, it's largely educational right now, because a lot of this music is being discovered for the first time.
The country where I have the most traction is Tunisia, and they speak French and Arabic, and I don't speak either. So not yet, but that's a very good example. You know, we're all human and we connect with different things. We're all different as well. So I don't think, you know, we should be just one thing or the other. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've said this to many clients who I've spoken to, especially in the current landscape that we have, that just music has no borders in that regards. When it, like, of course it can be in a different language, but music always moves us in a certain way, regardless of the language being used. It's all about the emotion and the vibe of the actual song, and how that artist is displaying that through their lyrics, or through their tone, or their vocals, however that's being done. I think it has no borders, and that's where right now especially we'll be seeing so many more creatives have the opportunity to expand out into different markets, especially the Latin spaces, now that people are more open to it more than ever than they were before, because it's become more of a consistency within just music in North America in general. And I think that's for the better. It'll make people more open to engaging with newer content that they maybe never would have prior.
I think they're more open to it because they now have more access to it.
Absolutely.
Before it wasn't even a choice. Now with the internet, it's sort of limitless, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's like AJ had mentioned, there's content out there all the time. New artists emerging all the time, because you can create content wherever. And having the ability to do that for creatives is vital, because if you have to spend upwards of $500 for one day in the studio, it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm eating eggs for the rest of the week, but I'm going to go to the studio and it's going to be great, right? But having the ability to do that anywhere is just making it that much more accessible for creatives, and better ROI when you can do it at home or at a smaller studio, right? Which is great. I guess with the current landscape, what sort of precautions should artists be considering right now? Are there any that you've yourself, Calma, run into in terms of, I guess, aside from the lack of ability for touring, are there any precautions that artists should be taking in regards to pursuing avenues in the current landscape?
I think what AJ said resonated, as into there's a saturation of content right now. So how do you separate yourself from the noise? How do you do that without being not yourself? So I think that's one thing that I think everybody's struggling with. There's lives, I don't even know how many lives there are, you know, daily. You see them on and you just get out of one and go into another. So how do you retain people's attention? And what I've been doing is sort of going with my gut and creating what I want to create, and not necessarily competing, but trying to be consistent with myself and my voice and whatever I want to put out there, because it can get a little hectic.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
also, and also being strategic with how I promote my content, where I promote it, and where I know I can get the most for whatever I'm investing in.
Yeah, I will add to that too. I love that you said consistency, because that's something I always try to bring up. And they say content is king, and I honestly think it's consistency. Calma was saying that, being
Consistency.
consistent is really important. And, people say content is king, and I think that it's actually consistency that is king, because the artists who are able to make the most of their audience, who are able to activate the people who are listening, who are interested in the content or interested in potential content that they're going to have, so often are able to activate that audience because they're there consistently. And it's not so much about like the most exciting thing. It's more about, were you there every Tuesday when you said you would be? Or was there always going to be that? Can they trust that the content is going to be consistently high quality? Can they trust it's going to be, there's a level of trust that comes with direct access to your fan base. And, consistency is what drives that trust in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. The landscape has certainly shifted, I would say, in the last like 5-10 years, where you see artists doing the release of singles predominantly over the course of a year. And yeah. I hear a lot of clients talk about, it's like, well, I want to do a release once every month for the entire year. Like, that's great. If you can do that, that's great. But I guess, Calma, would you have any precautions towards doing that, or suggestions if you were doing that as an artist?
It's expensive.
Absolutely.
It's expensive, and for example, to do a media tour or to do PR, not necessarily the outlets want to see you every month. So you have to be very, strategic as into maybe what outlets to use, what sort of months, or if you're promoting maybe in Argentina a specific song, and then another song, it's gonna, have more traction in Africa, or then I can see it happening. But if it's targeting one place every month, if you have the funds, it's a great idea because you create consistency. But if you don't, you want to be very strategic and specific to, how to put your work out there the most efficient way possible, because you want it to reach the most people as possible, no? So you don't want to just put your song out there when there's probably 39,000 songs being uploaded daily,
Is that an actual stat? I haven't seen that. As AJ, do you know?
It's in that area. I think
it's in that area.
It's definitely over the tens of thousands each week.
Wow.
It's been tossed around. I'm not going to give it number. I do know that it's upwards of the tens of thousands of releases every week.
Right. So how do you set yourself apart from the tens of thousands of tracks that are being released on a daily? That's where that consistency really comes in at that point, right? And being there for your listeners and for your fan base, and just constantly engaging.
Absolutely.
However you do that, right?
If you have a promotional plan for all of those months with the outlets confirmed and all the press confirmed, go for it. If you don't, you're going to be disappointed.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Was the planning is the other side of that. Like, that will make the difference, and that will help you at least rise to where, you're in a good spot to go forth from. If you're not planning and you just kind of like, hey, I got this song, I want to throw it up there, and you're going to put up one song a month, but you really haven't planned for all of the things that go around it, then it's really not going to help you as much as you'd like it to.
Yeah, I guess to touch on that, like it's certainly something that I try to educate our clients with as well, because indies, they have that mindset of wanting to stay consistent but have content constantly. So I guess on that, I'm kind of steering away from some of our questions here, but what sort of planning would you both suggest, and what sort of tools would be necessary to plan those accordingly? Maybe, is AJ, maybe you could touch on how Symphonic helps.
So I mean, when we're creating a marketing plan, you want to consider every vehicle that your song could be going on. And that could mean literally looking at vehicles and wrapping them at this market. You know, in this market, obviously, physical advertising, maybe not as much, but, you know, thinking about literally everywhere. Can it go on radio? Is it going to be radio? You know, is that going to be celestial, or is that going to be satellite? Are you talking about, you know, what are you doing on socials? It's not just about, hey, we're going to make a post about it. You know, those platforms are really built around advertising, really. So if you post something, you can't count on all of your fans or all of your audience seeing that post, because they're being served up all other types of content. So, you know, there may have to be a spend in there. What are you doing about advertising? Looking at literally every vehicle, you know, are we going to be doing any kind of interview spots? Is there television involved? Do we have television? You know, is press going to be on board for this one? I mean, you could go down the list for days. You know, do we have a physical activation? Are we doing a live activation? You know, is this worth doing? You know, if you have featurings on it, do we want to go live with somebody on the other side? How are we getting to some of those tastemakers, essentially? You know, how are we getting to, you know, radio? How are we getting to television? How are we getting to all of those avenues that could really make a difference in the life of the campaign? Because essentially a campaign it has a life cycle. You know, it begins, you want to make that campaign last as long as possible, but you can't plan for it. You have to keep, or you plan for it, but you have to keep pushing within that plan so that the life cycle can actually be extended, rather than, okay, we put out a song, it had its, you know, peak in the first week, we kind of saw it balance out, which is usually what happens in the data, and then we did nothing else to promote. And you want to avoid that for as long as possible. So planning really, and this is as important for singles as it is for albums, as it is for EPs. You know, even more so, of course, for albums and EPs. But I think what I'm noticing is that for singles, it's being avoided. You know, it's like, oh, we've got a single, we're going to put it up. Yeah, no big deal. And it's one of those things where if you have a single, it needs to be planned for the same way you would plan for an EP or much larger content at this point. Because again, you're talking about tons of competition in that digital space for just somebody's attention. You know, there used to be this old rule in advertising that it took, I think it was 11 impressions for somebody to be willing to consider a product. And if you think about that 11 impressions in terms of music, how long does, I don't know what the new number is, but how long does it take to get that consideration to actually press the button and listen? And then how long do you have them while they're listening to music for the first time? New music is much harder to get a new listener who's maybe not even in your audience yet to kind of hang on there. You've got less than 30 seconds, you know, and 30 seconds is right where you're going to be making money on that release. So you really want to get them in the first 30 seconds. So there's so much to consider when you're thinking about just your planning and extending the life of that single. And in order to rise to the top, it's really important to think about every single avenue that you could be putting this music on. You know, it's one of the other ones that I'm learning about right now that I absolutely love is sync licensing. You know, that's something that artists can be considering talking to, you know, sync licensors if they have music that fits for it. Of course, not everything fits, but I mean, that's another avenue to be getting your music in front of people. We've had some really interesting sync licenses recently that are great marketing drivers that we can bring to DSPs, or we can bring to radio, we can bring to TV and say, hey, this is happening for this song. You know, what else can we do to give it some more life? So, sorry, I get on a when it comes to marketing.
Very passionate, very passionate. That's what it is. That's okay.
Yeah. Identify with you.
Well, the one thing I was gonna ask, like, is the single leading up to an album, I guess, that would be typically considered part of the plan as well, right? But an integral part of the plan, if not for a CD release or an EP release.
Definitely. I mean, your single, you pick it based on, this is what I want to be the emblem of this album, or I want it to be the example of what you're going to get when you listen to this album. The other side of that is, especially for those who are very interested in playlist pitching, I can't pitch an entire album. That's not the way it works. When I talk to DSPs, they're like, okay, so what's the focus? Because they don't have time when they're listening to upwards of thousands of releases. They don't have time to listen through everything on the album.
We got 30 seconds maybe.
Yeah, you're lucky if you got 30 seconds. So it's really important. Those focus tracks actually drive what you'll be able to have highlighted from the album, essentially. So it's really important to be releasing singles ahead of an album, to give them space and time and breath. Depending on the genre, of course, different genres require different amounts of time. I know, I work with a lot of dembow artists. There's a very different, very different release timeline and life for those for those releases. Yeah. Especially when you're leading up to an album. So it's not the same as going after, working with like reggae, working with, like kind of rock releases, very different timelines. And in the Latin space, that's as true as it is for any other. So that's really important.
I feel as an artist, you have to have a budget for the promotion. I feel like 50, it's the work of creating it's a lot of work, but you're not done when the track or the video is done. That's when the other part of the works begins, which is the promoting and the marketing. And I always try to tell artists, like, if you have a budget for the video, you have to set from that budget a budget to promote your work, whether it be $200 or $2,000 or whatever. You can definitely use that money to promote your work. There's a lot of people right now who study PR and marketing and need a break to get their first client. So that could be an idea, reaching out to people who want to get in the business. Like I said, getting that collective of creatives to work and build a body of work and grow together. Because not necessarily, you make your first track and it should be on radio. So you kind of have to,
that's the hope. That's the hope.
That's the hope. And it happens sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. And it's okay. It's okay. It's a process, So there are a lot of people in the music industry who need a break and who are trying to find that break as well. So finding somebody who can help you with those strategies is very important. Another thing to give it more longevity, the release, is what a lot of rappers and trappers do, which is collaborations and remixes. I feel like remixes aren't only just for the hip hop or reggaeton community. It's also for any genre, really. You can have like an indie artist kind of have their vocals put into a rap record or a dance record or whatever. So looking for really cool ways to give it longevity is definitely collaborating with other artists. And that way also you can both use your budget to push it.
So I guess on that note, real quick as well.
And one more thing, definitely getting a digital distributor like Symphonic. Symphonic has helped me a lot, just to have the benefit that I can call them and they answer the phone, or they can give me advice or kind of steer me towards the direction that I need. It's very important. So, digital distribution is key.
Absolutely. And knowing that there are people passionate about music like AJ at a distribution channel like that, that you can go to them and trust the information that they're providing you. I can't stress that enough with any client that I've spoken with, is that work with people you can trust that are passionate about what you do as well, because then anything that they're putting forth to you is because they they think it'll benefit you. And it's not just there to benefit them, it's to benefit yourselves, like as a collective. And just make sure that you get your content in the hands of the people that need it, right?
Correct.
And I guess on that note of collaboration and artists working together and features, is there any sort of collective that you are currently working with, Calma?
Yes, actually during this quarantine or year
COVID,
pandemic,
quarantine.
COVID.
Yeah.
I've kind of had a sense of urgency. I don't know why. It just sparked, my sense of urgency and creativity. And I've just been getting together with a lot of colleagues, a lot of people, artists that are super talented, people in PR, photographers, people in film, engineers, and saying, come on, let's get some work done. Let's create. That's what we do, and thankfully, we're kind of all in the same mindset, and I've been able to put out a lot of new material, and it's been interesting. I mean, I've been able to make a few collaborations with brands, because at the end of the day, they still have a budget they need to put out there. And if it's not a festival, they have to put that money somewhere. So it's kind of created a lot of opportunities. So I've been concentrating more on creating opportunities rather than being bummed out because I didn't get to play at Glastonbury. I had the opportunity to work with a rapper here in Puerto Rico, which was kind of cool. But I haven't really, my wish list it's a pretty big wish list, like Beyonce and
I mean, you did
and Shakira and
you opened for Beyonce though, didn't you?
I had the honor. I still can't believe it, but yeah, that was pretty cool.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Were you at any point able to meet with Beyonce as well?
Didn't get to meet her because as soon as she got off of the plane, she went to get dressed and on stage. I mean, she is just that great. No, I didn't get to meet her. She did wink at me. Ooh. And it was kind of special from from the stage, but just her giving me that opportunity was a lot bigger than me getting a picture with her.
Absolutely.
That was the year I first put out my first project. She could have just hired a DJ to open, and she took a chance with me and really gave me that opportunity, and it opened a lot of doors for me. So I will forever be indebted. So
shout out Beyonce. So for an artist that doesn't quite fit into one genre, how does one adjust the approach in promoting a release?
So AJ. Genre benders is such a big topic right now because everyone, especially in the artist community, I feel like the conversation is more, we're past genre. Nobody's paying genre anymore. And that's kind of true for the audience, but it's not necessarily true for the people who are actually programming this music and who are, running radio stations and who are playlisting playlists, it's definitely still a very genre-focused world, especially when you're talking about, I often have this conversation where we're talking about content coming from LATAM and being put into the US market. Mm-hmm. Because of the way that the US market is structured, Latin ends up falling into literally just a bucket of Latin, and it could be somebody who is rock sitting next to somebody who is dembow sitting next to, because it all kind of gets bucketed, unfortunately. Right. So genre is really important. For the most basic reason, it's, for my purposes especially, it's getting to the right person, making sure that I'm getting to the right tastemaker, the person who's going to be able to make a difference in the life of this song. If you're, one of the things that I'm noticing the biggest overlap in, that's kind of hard to place or put a finger on, has always been actually Latin, like urban or Latin hip hop genres, Latin, and then like dancehall genres, anything in the Caribbean really, like that dancehall, soca, all of those vibes, and then Afrobeat. And now that Afrobeat has become such a really big player on the world stage, which is wonderful. It's my favorite genre. It's great, but there's been a lot of overlap because the sounds are so intoxicating. They're so wonderful that there's been so much use of that in other genres, or emergence of that in other genres, which I feel is natural because it exists there already. You know, when you look at any of the Latin genres that are rhythmic, most of the base of those genres comes from Africa in the first place. So it was all there to begin with. And now you have this overlap of sound taking place because now there is a recognized genre called Afrobeat. There are, you know, recognized Caribbean genres overlapping with, you know, Latin hip hop at the moment. And you find that, especially in Latin hip hop, there's this like cloud of everything, and we kind of want to bucket it and put a name on it. And, you know, the worst one, I hate using it too, is like the urban genre. You know, that's not a thing, but it's not really quite hip hop. It's not really quite, you know, it doesn't fit into trap. It's not exactly reggaeton. It's not reggae. It's not dancehall. It's not Afrobeat. And it kind of like fits in this middle space. And I think marketing those releases is more about identifying the audience that is listening and identifying that for the tastemakers themselves. It's about telling a story of where did the sound come from? Why does this sound exist? And, you know, who's listening? Because truthfully, they can't be at every single one of these emergences of genres. You know, you can't have the same editorials showing up for the birth of whatever the next genre is going to be. And I think that that's where we're at. That's why everyone's calling it, you know, post-genre, where I don't think we're necessarily post-genre. I think a lot of genres are mixing and creating new ones, and we just don't have names for them yet. And it's an exciting time, but it's more about defining what is that people are listening to, who is listening to this, and really being advocates for what that sound is so that it's getting to the right audience. I think it's personally very exciting. That's kind of where I live musically, personally. Like, those are my favorite sounds in the world. Yeah, I just think it's a really exciting time, but it's really about telling the story of who is listening to this music, because no matter what editorial you're going to, if you're going to DSPs, if you're going to radio, if you're going to television programming, you have to tell them who is listening, because they're programming for the audience that is listening, and they want to know, who does this sit in front of? Who, you know, what stage is this actually on? So I don't think, you know, marketing the genre when it's kind of in that middle genre is necessarily that different, but it is more heavily dependent on educating whoever, you know, you're marketing to about who is the audience that you're even getting this interest from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you touch on that, because it's as soon as it becomes like a new genre comes to light in the mainstream aspect of radio, then you completely see these shifts where all of the other genres start adding in little bits from this emergence of a new genre or newly discovered genre. Like for some reason, an example came to mind when you had mentioned it, when Jay-Z started doing stuff with Linkin Park. When that transition from rock switched over to hip hop on a mainstream side, I remember that coming together and people were like, no, what is this? But then everyone being like, yes, what is this? And I think that's kind of what's taking place right now as well.
One of the biggest genres I think of, you know, in past years where we've kind of seen the whole life cycle of it was like electronic music. Electronic music has been around for ages, and it was particularly popular in Europe. And people, you know, in the US really didn't, you know, they didn't take it on. And then there was this movement, you know, like this shift to where EDM became the thing. And once we could put a finger on what EDM was and it became mainstream, it filtered down into genres like country, where you're like, why is there EDM in country? But there was. And I think that's the story of so many aspects of our life, but especially of music, it's the story of language. Even like when you think about language and when it crosses over, and I think that that's why we're having this conversation about Latin right now. When you think of language forms out of other languages interacting with each other, and my best example is I actually grew up speaking Spanglish. My joke is that I'm fluent.
Great movie. Yeah.
But that has emerged because you have people who moved here, and there's now English talking with Spanish, and they're in the same space, and you have this emergence of a whole culture around it. And music is very much the same way, where like they're interacting in the same space, and the whole culture has developed around it. And we're at that next point of whatever that is, that emergence, for 100%. I'm sure we're there. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's the exciting part, right? Yeah. It's that we've I guess potentially maybe it would I guess it's already happening. I was going to say K-pop, and like J-pop. That's slowly starting to make it's not slowly, it's quickly coming into the market. Yeah. And I think we have a girl here who loves anything that she would class as squeaky pop. And so she loves that whole realm where that's being integrated now into mainstream radio, mainstream pop. So I think it's like, is it Blackpink or one of the groups, the girl groups is from Korea, is going to be doing a feature with Selena Gomez.
Oh wow!
Like one of her like cream of the crop artists that she loves. So that integration into mainstream North American content is only paving the way for even more artists, similarly to the Latin market, where new artists are emerging and jumping into these collaborative features with gigantic other artists, which are showcasing them in all these new markets, bringing new audiences to everybody.
One of the ones that I love to bring up too, that often gets kind of pushed to the side when we're talking about Latin markets and Latin music, is Brazil. Brazil has amazing content and so much potential, so much audience. It's huge. And so many genres of their own, even, when you think about it. And there's so many artists working to try to build into that market. And it's such a subset of the Latin market, but it's humongous.
They have their own market.
Yeah, they have their own market, 100%. But I think that it's important to also shine a light on it as a Latin market, because it's one of those that kind of fades into the background, but it's slowly seeping in as well, especially with like funk, Brazilian funk coming over into the hip hop genres, and so many collaborations happening there. And it's an exciting sound. I just saw the other day, actually, it was a complete side note. I saw Gloria Estefan put out she put out a remix of, not The Rhythm Is Gonna Get You. What's the other one? Conga, I think. Yes, the conga. So she put out another version, but it's samba, which is, and it's Brazilian beats. It's the same song, but done in a samba like vibe. And I think she's as with it, where that is the market that I think is also underrepresented, and something that is like finally getting some light shed on it. And we're going to see that one also come in and, play a part into the rhetoric that we're talking about now, the conversation.
I feel like genre bending is kind of the story of my life. I was a military brat, so I grew up in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, the south of the States, and Germany. So I liked a lot of different types of music, and not necessarily you have to move a lot to identify with a lot of things. There's, the era of the internet and people discover different things and they like different things. So when I started making music, people were just constantly asking me, but what genre is it? And I would just be like, I don't know, like it's this mixed with this and this, and I kind of had to adapt to not totally rebel with the music business, but adapt to it. And what I do is, like, if I have a song that's a little bit more funky and soulful, then I will market it towards those types of radio stations or those types of outlets. Or if I have I have an issue with the urban word because I think there's a big discussion there, and I'm kind of not for taking it away. I'll let you know why in a few minutes, but because I don't know how to explain a song that has R&B, but it's not hip hop, but it's, it comes from the urban area, like urban architecture, so if I have more of a hip hop sort of song with the rapper, I can't pitch it to, I don't know, a romantic movie that's into sci-fi, like you have to kind of then, it's kind of better because you can pitch it towards different, different outlets, like different types of radio stations. Some are more indie, some are more commercial. Sometimes you make a more commercial track, then you just direct that track to the more commercial outlets.
Yeah, I guess it does make it a little bit more limiting if it does kind of go outside of the norm of a specific genre. But then at the same time, I think it will lend an ear to people who are of maybe listen to that one genre more, but then it'll gravitate them towards exploring. And music is such an explorative pastime.
Genre bending is very important for the evolution of music, and it's always been, nothing has not been discovered already, but the mixes or what you can bring to it, as an individual, to the music, and that's very important to still have people to explore with genres. And like AJ said, it's part of creating these new cultures with the evolution of our time, so it's very important. The also important part is, and the realistic part is, that there is a business, and there are radio stations that have certain clients or certain brands that have to match with that sound, or there are certain TV series or movies that are looking for a particular sound. So it's just targeting where you think it fits.
Having that team to help you along the way, right?
Absolutely.
Are there any exciting projects that have upcoming that you'd like to tell anyone viewing right now? Maybe Calma yourself to start.
Yes, I have a single coming out September 10th with Symphonic, and it's another single from my album Calma, which I'll be putting out by singles, not every month, but
with a plan.
With a plan every once in a while. So I'm very excited about that.
Amazing. And AJ, for yourself, anything in particular that you have upcoming that you're really excited to be working on? Or
I'm excited about everything I'm working on. I get so excited, and then I can't even focus, because then there's 8 projects sitting, and I'm like, I love them all. So my most exciting project, I will say, that I'm working on right now is with a producer artist named Alcover. I think it's really exciting that so many producers are actually standing in front and saying, look, I created this, and putting their name on it. To be completely honest, like, if you think back to all the music that you love, so much of it is produced by the same person or the same team of people, and you have no idea. You think it's just a particular artist or something, oh, I like this. And you realize later on that it was the producer really that, was behind it. So I'm really excited about that. It's definitely a trend in Latin music right now, especially for, producers to kind of stand out in front and take credit, which is really exciting. So Alcover is a great artist. He's been in the scene for a really long time now, and still super young, which is amazing. He actually was one of the producers, or part of a production duo that had created Danza Kuduro, which turns 10 years old this year, which was Don Omar. So he is producing, he has an album coming out in November, slated, knock on wood, let's hope it stays that way. And he's worked with so many exciting artists that I really love. He works in the dembow space, he works in reggaeton, he works in like more mainstream pop space, he works really across the board. He's worked with other artists like, Gloria Trevi, and I mean, completely different genres. If you're talking about a genre bending producer, and I think producers are really good at this too, he's really all over the place. So I'm really excited about the project. He has an upcoming single coming out next month. I can't say who's on it, but look out for it, Kobe.
Oh, okay.
And he had a single out. You know, we were talking about singles leading to an album. He had a single out last month called Never. That's, you know, over 1 million streams. We're very proud of on YouTube, and the project is doing really well so far. And you know, it's exciting to create a plan, work on the plan, and see it to fruition. And I'm really excited to be working on this project in that capacity. If you look at the history of Latin music on the mainstream stage, I mean, going back to the 50s even,
Absolutely.
there's been one wave, you know, even if it was just maybe 1 or 2 songs, you know, you look at, I think of Richie Valens, I think of, you know,
Jose Feliciano.
Jose Feliciano. I mean, you name it, there's always been. Gloria Estefan, we mentioned earlier. Gloria Estefan is another one who, like, there was a wave in the 80s, and she was part of creating that wave. And it's the story of Latin music. It's so funny too, because it feels like it should have never been a wave. It should have always been there. It should, you know, like, because it's always been part of the story. You know, when I talk to my family and you think about the people who have been here before me or been around before me, it was always, you know, American music or mainstream music and Latin music, and they exist like this. And that hasn't been the story of mainstream America, but it should have been, because we've always been here.
Yeah.
Always, and always, you know, been part of the mainstream in some way, shape, or form.
Again, I appreciate the conversation and the candidness with you too. It's been very fun having having this interview, or it's more like a discussion, and I really appreciate that. And I look forward to hearing some more music coming from you, Calma. And AJ, send me that artist that you're working with. I want to listen to that.
I absolutely will.
Please, yeah, I love it. So please, everyone, make sure to follow Play NPE at Play NPE book on all of our social medias, and stay tuned for future online events. We'll be doing plenty more of these and on our IG lives for some more client success stories. Ladies, thank you so much for being with me today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, okay?
You too.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I appreciate the conversation and the candidness with you too. So please, everyone, make sure to follow Play NPE on all of our social medias, and stay tuned for future online events. We'll be doing plenty more of these and on our IG lives for some more client success stories. Ladies, thank you so much for being with me today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, okay?
You too.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.